Imagine waking up tomorrow morning with a singular, crystalline intention. Today you tell yourself, I will do meaningful work. I will read that book gathering dust on your nightstand. I will finally focus on what matters. The conviction feels real, almost tangible. You can taste the productivity ahead. Yet by 9:47 a.m., you find yourself 43 minutes into a YouTube rabbit hole about a conspiracy theory you don't even believe. Your phone glows in your hand like a talisman of broken promises. You have no memory of how you got there. Think about this. What if your struggle to focus has nothing to do with willpower and everything to do with how the modern world is secretly reprogramming your brain? In this video, we are going to uncover the real reason you can't focus. A reason that goes far deeper than simple motivation or self-discipline. And the last revelation of all, the one we'll reach at the end of this journey, will change the way you understand your own mind forever. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share this video with someone who constantly feels mentally scattered or overwhelmed. Because what you're about to learn doesn't just explain distraction. It reveals how your very perception of reality has been hijacked and how you can reclaim it. This is the strange magic of modern distraction. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive as temptation you consciously reject. Instead, it dissolves your intentions like sugar in water so gradually, so seamlessly, that you cannot pinpoint the exact moment you surrendered. 1 second, you are opening your email to send a critical message. The next, you are reading a Reddit thread about whether dolphins have self-awareness. 40 minutes have vanished into the digital ether, and you cannot remember the intermediate steps. It feels like amnesia. It feels like possession. But here is the deeper paradox, the one that should disturb you. You are not lazy. You are not weak-willed. If anything, your generation has been marketed as the most self-optimized, productivity-obsessed cohort in history. You read books about focus. You buy noise-canceling headphones. You download meditation apps. You set intentions, create schedules, and use every digital tool designed to combat distraction. And yet, none of it works. Not really. Not durably. You might have one good day, a moment of singular focus that feels like you finally got it. But by day 3, you're back in the fog, watching hours evaporate like morning dew under the weight of your notifications. So the question becomes unavoidable. If willpower is not the problem, what is? If discipline is not the answer, then what architecture of modern life has made focus once the default state of human consciousness now feel like climbing a mountain while wearing chains? The conventional wisdom tells you to try harder, wake up earlier, eliminate distractions, use willpower like a muscle to be exercised. But what if that entire framework is backwards? What if your inability to focus is not a personal failure at all, but the inevitable symptom of a condition far deeper and more systemic than any self-help book dares to admit? What if your brain has not broken, but has been deliberately reprogrammed by forces so subtle, so omnipresent, that you've mistaken the programming for your own nature? Consider this unsettling truth. Your ancestors possessed the capacity for hours of unbroken concentration. Medieval monks could copy manuscripts for entire days without their minds wandering. Scholars could lose themselves in single texts for weeks, not because they were more disciplined, but because their environment did not wage psychological warfare on their attention every waking second. They were not better at focus. They simply were not under siege. Yet today, you are surrounded by technologies explicitly engineered by thousands of PhD-level scientists and behavioral psychologists whose singular job, whose only job is to fragment your attention into profitable pieces. These are not neutral tools. They are not mere conveniences. They are precision instruments of psychological capture, designed with the same ruthlessness that engineers optimize slot machines or laboratory addiction protocols. And the cruelest irony? You blame yourself. You feel ashamed of your distraction. You internalize it as a personal inadequacy. You never stop to ask whether the battlefield itself has been rigged against you before you even stepped onto it. This is where our journey begins. Not with blame, not with shame, but with the radical act of seeing clearly. Because once you understand what is actually happening, not to your willpower, but to your neurochemistry, your environment, and your very capacity for conscious choice, everything changes. The question you've been asking yourself is wrong, and the moment you ask the right question, the chains begin to loosen. Let us descend deeper into the subterranean chambers where the real architecture of distraction lives. The problem is not your phone. Your phone is merely the instrument, the visible manifestation of something far more ancient and insidious, the human mind's fundamental vulnerability to escape. The existential philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre wrote of something he called bad faith, the human tendency to flee from the weight of freedom and responsibility by surrendering ourselves to external systems, narratives, and distractions. We do not merely distract ourselves passively. We actively collude with distraction because the alternative, sitting alone with our thoughts, facing the rawness of our own existence, feels unbearable. Distraction is not an affliction. It is a choice, made thousands of times per day, to avoid confronting who we actually are. But why? Why is stillness so terrifying that we would rather fragment ourselves? Carl Jung understood something that modern psychology often overlooks. Beneath every compulsive behavior lies an unintegrated shadow. The parts of ourselves we refuse to see, we unconsciously act out. When you cannot focus, when you perpetually reach for your phone, when you doom scroll at 3 a.m. despite exhaustion, you are not lacking discipline. You are fleeing from something. Perhaps it is the gnawing sense that your life lacks meaning. Perhaps it is the creeping suspicion that you are not who you believe yourself to be. Perhaps it is the quiet terror of your own mortality, the awareness that time is finite and you are squandering it. Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of pessimism, observed that humans exist in a perpetual state of boredom or pain. We oscillate between the two like a pendulum. When we experience pain, emotional, existential, or physical, we desperately seek relief. When that relief arrives and we settle into boredom, the emptiness becomes so intolerable that we voluntarily return to a state of low-grade anxiety just to feel something. This is why you check your phone even when you know nothing interesting will be there. The uncertainty itself is more tolerable than the void. The neuroscientist Anna Lembke, in her groundbreaking work on dopamine, reveals that the modern attention economy exploits this ancient vulnerability with surgical precision. Our brains are wired to seek novelty, an evolutionary adaptation that once helped us survive. A novel sound in the forest might be a predator. A change in the environment might signal danger or opportunity. But in the digital age, this ancient survival mechanism has been weaponized. Every notification, every algorithmic suggestion, every endless scroll is a microdose of novelty, triggering dopamine releases that feel like urgent survival signals. Your brain cannot distinguish between a genuine threat and a TikTok notification. Over time, this creates what Viktor Frankl called existential frustration, a deep sense that life lacks inherent meaning. When meaning erodes, the mind becomes desperately susceptible to distraction. Frankl observed this in his psychiatric patients. Those who lacked a sense of purpose experienced what he called neugenic neurosis, a form of psychological suffering rooted in meaninglessness rather than trauma or conflict. In our age of infinite information and infinite choice, we experience unprecedented levels of this condition. Here is the tragic irony. The system that claims to connect us, to provide us with infinite possibilities and endless stimulation, has actually severed us from the one thing that makes us human, the capacity to sit with ourselves, to ask difficult questions, and to build a meaningful life through sustained attention and deliberate choice. We have outsourced our consciousness to algorithms designed to keep us perpetually unsettled, perpetually reaching, perpetually incomplete. The distraction you experience is not a bug in the system. It is the intended feature. Most people never ask the question that should haunt every waking hour. What am I becoming through the way I spend my attention? This is not a rhetorical flourish. It is the central question of your existence. Because here is a truth so foundational that it reshapes everything. You are not the sum of your genes, your circumstances, or your intentions. You are the sum of what you consistently attend to. Psychologist William James articulated this with devastating clarity. My experience is what I agree to attend to. Nothing more, nothing less. Your reality is quite literally constructed from the scaffolding of your focus. If you attend to fear, you do not merely experience fear, you become a fearful person. The neural pathways that form are the pathways of fear. Your brain physically rewires itself around the patterns of attention you reinforce. If you attend to fragmentation, you become fragmented. If you attend to comparison, you become comparative and perpetually insufficient. This is why chronic distraction is not merely unproductive, it is ontologically devastating. You are not just losing time, you are losing yourself. Consider what happens neurologically when your attention is chronically scattered. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for executive function, deliberate choice, and long-term planning, begins to atrophy from disuse. Simultaneously, the amygdala, your brain's alarm center, constantly scanning for threats and stimulation, becomes hyperactive and oversensitized. You literally become a person more capable of reacting than reflecting, more capable of consuming than creating. Over months and years, this creates a form of cognitive learned helplessness. You stop believing in your capacity to sustain attention because your brain has been conditioned to expect interruption. But the consequences extend far beyond neurology. When your attention is fragmented, your identity fragments with it. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi discovered in his research on flow that humans experience their deepest sense of self, their most coherent sense of purpose, during moments of complete absorption. Flow is not a luxury or an aesthetic experience. It is the state in which the self actually coheres. When you cannot enter flow, when you cannot sustain attention long enough to disappear into a task, you never experience that coherence. You remain perpetually scattered, perpetually searching for yourself. This creates a shadow epidemic that statistics never capture. A generation experiencing profound alienation from their own lives. You scroll through feeds documenting other people's coherence, their focus, their presence, while your own existence feels like watching a movie through frosted glass. There is always a barrier between you and direct experience. There is always a screen, a distraction, a division of attention. The cultural consequences are equally dire. Democracy itself depends on a population capable of sustained attention, the ability to read complex arguments, to sit with difficult ideas, to form coherent worldviews. When the average person can no longer concentrate for more than a few minutes, when information arrives in fragments and algorithm-curated snippets, the very possibility of informed citizenry collapses. You do not think your own thoughts anymore. You think the thoughts that algorithms learned you would click on. And perhaps most insidiously, when you cannot focus, you cannot grieve. You cannot process loss, metabolize pain, or integrate trauma. Healing requires sustained attention to what hurts. Distraction has become our collective anesthetic, a way of numbing ourselves to the weight of existence. We are not living through this era. We are sleepwalking through it. The question that should terrify you is this: how much of your unlived life have you already surrendered to the machinery of distraction? And more urgently, how much more will you surrender before you realize what is actually being taken from you? But here is where the narrative transforms. Here is where despair converts into defiance. Because the same mind that was conditioned to scatter can be retrained to unite. The chains are real, but they are not unbreakable. The Stoic philosophers understood something that modern psychology is only now rediscovering. Freedom is not found in the absence of obstacles. Freedom is found in mastery of the self. Epictetus, himself born a slave, wrote with a clarity that cuts through centuries, "It is not things themselves that disturb people, but their judgments about those things." Your distraction is not caused by your phone. It is caused by your relationship with it, a relationship you can radically alter. This requires a fundamental shift in perspective. You must stop viewing focus as a willpower problem and start viewing it as a sovereignty problem. Every moment you surrender your attention to algorithmic capture, you are making a choice, even if it feels involuntary. The revolution begins the moment you realize that choice is still yours to make. Tristan Harris, the former Google design ethicist who exposed the psychology of digital persuasion, speaks of a concept called time well spent. He argues that technology is not inherently the enemy, but technology designed without your consent, without your awareness, absolutely is. The rebellion is not about rejecting all tools. It is about reclaiming agency over which tools you use and how you use them. Begin radically small. Not with grand resolutions, but with single moments of choice. Before you reach for your phone, pause. 3 seconds. Ask yourself, am I choosing this or am I reacting? That pause, that microscopic act of awareness, is where freedom lives. Each time you insert that pause, you are literally rewiring your neural pathways. You are teaching your brain that distraction is not inevitable. It is optional. The neuroscientist Andrew Huberman has documented that focus requires friction, the effortful redirection of attention away from the path of least resistance. But here is the revolutionary insight. Friction builds strength. Each time you resist the pull toward distraction, you are not just preserving your focus in that moment. You are increasing your capacity for focus in all future moments. Your brain becomes more capable of sustained attention the more you practice it. But there is something deeper than discipline at work here. It is alignment. When your external actions align with your internal values, when your attention flows toward what genuinely matters to you rather than what algorithms have decided should matter, something shifts. Focus becomes effortless because it is no longer a battle against yourself. It is an expression of yourself. This is why the philosophers and mystics of every tradition arrived at the same conclusion through different paths. Attention is love. When you give your full attention to a task, to a person, to a moment, you are expressing devotion. You are saying, "This matters. You matter. This moment matters." In a world that profits from your fragmentation, that act of focused love becomes revolutionary. The path forward requires 3 commitments. First, radical honesty about what you are avoiding when you seek distraction. Second, deliberate curation of your environment, removing the tools of capture, surrounding yourself with what nourishes rather than exploits you. Third, the daily practice of presence, building your capacity for stillness through meditation, through silence, through sustained attention to one thing at a time. You are not powerless. You are not broken. You are simply remembering how to be free. We arrive now at the revelation I promised at the beginning, the one that will change the way you understand your own mind forever. And it is this: focus is not a cognitive skill. It is not a productivity hack. It is not a technique you master and then possess. Focus is the very foundation of consciousness itself. The way you focus is the way you live, and the quality of your attention is the quality of your existence. This is not metaphor. This is neurology, philosophy, and lived reality converging into a single, undeniable truth. Consider what attention actually is. At its most basic level, attention is the mechanism by which the infinite chaos of reality becomes organized into a coherent experience. Your brain receives approximately 11 million bits of information per second, but your conscious mind can only process about 40 to 50 bits per second. Everything you experience, everything you know, believe, and perceive is the result of what your attention selects from that overwhelming flood of data. In other words, you do not perceive reality as it is. You perceive reality as your attention shapes it. And if your attention is fragmented, scattered, and externally controlled, then the reality you inhabit is fragmented, scattered, and externally controlled. You do not see the world clearly. You see the world as algorithms have trained you to see it. The Buddhist teaching of mindfulness means something different than the Western appropriation suggests. It does not mean relaxation or meditation technique. It means right mindfulness, the deliberate conscious direction of attention toward what is true, what is real, what is sacred. The Buddha taught that enlightenment is not about gaining new knowledge. It is about seeing clearly. And seeing clearly requires attention that is not hijacked, not fragmented, not colonized by external forces. This is why the great spiritual traditions across every culture and epoch arrived at the same fundamental insight. Consciousness is cultivated through the mastery of attention. The Sufis called it dhikr, remembrance, the sacred practice of returning attention again and again to what truly matters. The Christian mystics called it contemplation, the sustained gaze of love toward the divine. The Stoics called it prosoche, watchfulness, the continuous vigilance over where your mind goes. Different languages, different frameworks, but the same essential practice. Taking control of your attention is the path to awakening. And here is the paradox that will liberate you. You cannot force focus. You cannot willpower your way into presence, but you can create the conditions in which focus naturally arises. Focus emerges when you are no longer divided against yourself. It appears when your actions align with your values, when you have removed the constant friction of competing impulses and external manipulation. Focus is what happens when you stop running from yourself. This is why Viktor Frankl's insight is so profound. Humans can endure almost any suffering if they have a why, a sense of ultimate meaning. When you lack meaning, distraction becomes irresistible because distraction is the only escape from meaninglessness. But when you reconnect with your why, when you remember what actually matters to you, what you are called to create, what you are meant to become, focus becomes inevitable. The mind naturally orients toward what is meaningful. The tragic reality of our age is not that people cannot focus. It is that they have forgotten what is worth focusing on. We live in a world of infinite choices and infinite content, yet we have never been more uncertain about what matters. The algorithms promise to solve this for us by deciding what should capture our attention, but in surrendering that choice, we surrender the very thing that makes us human, the capacity to author our own consciousness. Consider the life you want to live, not the life you think you should live, not the life social media suggests you should want, but the life that calls to you in your most honest moments. That life requires sustained attention. It requires the ability to sit with difficulty, to build skills over years, to love people deeply enough to truly listen. It requires the capacity to be fully present in your own existence. Every moment you reclaim from distraction is a moment you reclaim your life. Every hour you focus on what matters is an hour you are actually alive, not sleepwalking through existence, but present, aware, conscious. And over time, these moments accumulate into a life, a coherent life, a meaningful life, a life that is actually yours. This is the ultimate revelation. You are not struggling to focus because something is wrong with you. You are struggling to focus because something profound within you, your soul, your essence, your deepest self, is demanding that you wake up. The anxiety you feel, the restlessness that drives you to distraction, the gnawing sense that something is missing, these are not symptoms of dysfunction. They are symptoms of your consciousness rebelling against fragmentation. They are your being insisting that you remember who you are. The path forward requires only this: begin today. Not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect. Today, choose one moment, one task, one conversation, and give it your complete, undivided attention. Feel the difference. Notice how different it feels to be truly present, and then choose again tomorrow and the day after that. Because the revolution is not won in grand gestures, it is won in small, repeated acts of choosing presence over distraction, meaning over noise, wholeness over fragmentation. Each choice rewires your brain. Each moment of focus rebuilds your capacity for consciousness. You are not trying to become a more productive person. You are trying to become a fully alive one. And that is a revolution worth fighting for. That is a freedom worth reclaiming. That is your birthright as a conscious being. The power to direct your own awareness, to author your own experience, to live with intention rather than being lived by algorithms. Choose presence, choose depth, choose yourself. Because when you control your attention, no one else can control you.